For this week's Sim Racing Tip Fridays, I'm going to be giving a few tips on how to prepare for a league race. This can be really helpful, especially if this is your first league or if you're getting into endurance racing. A good way to prepare so you know what you're going into, and that would be to set up an AI race similar to what your league race is going to be and run through it so you're all ready to go when the time comes to hop into that online session. Now this can be for any sim. Today we have Race Room opened up here on the single race selection menu. And before we get into this quick race, we're just going to look at a few settings that are important to note when trying to replicate your league settings. So hopefully you know some of the basic details about what your league will be running for the events, maybe things such as time of day, the temperatures, the weather conditions, the tire wear usage, the fuel usage, whether there's a pit stop or not, how long the races are, etc. And you want to replicate those settings as close as you can within the sim. Before getting too deep into it, you'll probably want to go out and do a few laps just to start with to find a nice AI difficulty, which is quite balanced with your skill level. You'll also want to make sure you've got the right penalty system selected, like the slowdowns, time penalties, drive-thrus, all that stuff. So in case you make a mistake in your AI race, you know not to do that in your real league race. So you can set up a qualifying session to try replicate what the conditions and what the feeling might be in a qualifying session in your league, but with how unpredictable the AI are in sim racing, it might not give you a true reflection of where your position will be in your actual league race. What I'd usually do is come to the grid position here and I'd select the position where I would usually think my ability would put me in my league race. So I wouldn't always just go put myself at first. If I think there's a chance that I'm not going to be able to get pole position in my race, then I'm going to start myself a little bit further down the grid so I'm prepared for in case I don't get pole position. Starting a pole position, you don't have a whole lot to practice for there. You're sort of just jumping off the line and probably getting around the corner in first position, and there's not much to worry about after that. You will want to be prepared in case there's other cars in front and around you and know how to handle that situation in case that happens. And also you want to check your pit stop settings if there's a mandatory pit stop, whether you have to change tyres or not. That's also important to note. We need to know how much fuel you're going to use in the race. So if your race is decided by number of laps, then it's quite easy. You just need to know how many litres of fuel you're using per lap, take that number and times it by the number of laps, and then you've got your number, and then I'd add just another lap of fuel on top of that to be extra safe. However, if your race duration is decided by time, then you'll need a little bit of calculating to get the number that you need. Now there are some fuel calculating apps on the app stores, so you can go search those. They're quite easy to find, but I'm just going to go through the calculation that I use to get fuel for the races that I do. So we're going to run through an example here. First we're going to start off with the number of minutes in the race. So let's just say 1 hour race, that's 60 minutes, it could be 45 minutes, however long your race is. For this calculation example, we're just going to do a 60-minute race. Then times it by the number of seconds in a minute, which is 60. So 60 times 60, that gives us 3,600. That's how many seconds there are in the race. Then you want to work out how long your lap time is on average in seconds. So let's just say a 1 minute 30 lap time, which is 90 seconds. So we're going to take the length of the race in seconds, which was 3,600, and we're going to divide that by 90 seconds, which was our average lap time. And then we get a number, well in this case is 40, and that's how many laps there should be in the race. Sometimes +1 or -1. Just be prepared for an extra lap. So what I would do here is I'm probably going to go from 40 laps to 41 laps to be safe. We're predicting that there's 41 laps in the race, so we're going to take that number, 41, and times it by the litres of fuel we're using per lap, which let's just say in this case is going to be 2.5 litres per lap, times 41, and that's how much fuel we're going to need for the entire race, which in this case would be 102.5 litres. And in most sims you can't add half a litre, so that would just be 103 litres, and for me, just to be extra safe, I'd probably add just another litre on top of that. So now that you know how much fuel you need for the race, is there a mandatory pit stop? Are you going to take all your fuel at the start of the race, or are you going to go 50-50 and refuel at the pit stop? Well, one thing to consider is that in the sim that you're using, in the pit stops, do tyres and fuel change at the same time, or do they refuel the car and change the tyres one after the other? Well, if your sim does both of these things at the same time, then it's probably best to go half and half with your fuel strategy, because you're not losing time in the pit stop by taking extra fuel, and you'll also have a lighter car at the start of the race, so you'll have a little bit better lap time. But if it's like iRacing where you don't change tyres and fuel at the same time, it takes extra time to add fuel to the car, then I would suggest put all your fuel in the car at the start of the race. Or maybe you're running a full tank at the start of the race and you can't put any more in, you'll have to add that little bit extra fuel in your pit stop to make it to the end. So So just keep that in mind when it comes to pit stops and refueling and your whole fuel strategy. And it's also a good idea to have a bit of an idea of when you're going to pit in the race. Usually it's a good idea to pit around halfway through the race if you're changing tyres, because then you get to make the most of both those sets of tyres. But it's also really important to consider the traffic around you. If you're getting held up by traffic, it might be worth pitting a little earlier so you can jump them and undercut them and end up in front of them after the pit stops. If you've got quite a big gap out the front, then it might be worth driving longer and pitting a bit later so that you don't get caught up in the traffic by pitting a little bit earlier. And then again, if you're leading but the cars are right behind you, you need to be aware that they might try undercut you, so just be prepared to react to that. Just quickly, something worth noting, if there's a chance of rain in your races, just make sure that you practice in multiple conditions so that you're completely prepared for what might come. And you want to get your launches right. If you're doing standing starts, you want to try get that as good as you can, try avoid wheel spin. And if you're doing rolling starts, then just trying to get that point where you jump perfect. So especially if you're doing standing starts, spend multiple attempts just practicing getting it as clean and as quick as possible without a wheel spin. And very importantly, you want to be nailing your pit entrances. So it might be best to go into a practice session and do it lap after lap, just trying to enter the pit lane, getting that braking point right for the pit entry. And if there's a car in front of you, you might have to be a little bit more cautious, just like that. They hammered the brakes there, but you want to try and make this as quick as possible and then make sure you... So that was a terrible entrance. You want to be right on the pit limiter as you get to the pit limiter line. And then you want to be stopping right on the spot and braking as late as you possibly can for the actual pit box as well. Then you're going to save as much time as you can, because you can actually lose seconds in the pit stop if you're a bit too lazy on the pit entry. Then again, make sure you're good with your launch out of the pit box. And on your way again, just be cautious on the pit exit and get back on your way. Now, I just had the world's most terrible pit stop because I forgot to turn off the car and then I forgot to turn it back on again. So I'm absolutely miles at the back now, but I hope you get the point of this video, and I hope these tips might have helped you, especially if you're preparing for your first league race or even endurance race. Let me know what you think in the comments, and if you have your own tips, feel free to share those as well. Thank you all for watching. As always, make sure to check out simrace247.com if you want to keep up with your latest sim racing news, updates, events, blog posts and more. And yeah, I'll catch you in the next video. Goodbye for now.